the red-hot light of the North Star. She opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny, of a people, with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery. She challenged it with burning eyes and black skin, torn skin, whipped skin, degraded skin, smashed skin, dehumanized skin, dehumanized skin. Strong enough to bring a fee, strong enough to be free. To be free. To be free. Strong enough to bring a fee. Strong enough to be free. Strong enough to bring a fee. Strong enough to be free. Strong enough to be free. Strong enough to bring a fee. Strong, 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 strong.
To the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. And we do have some breaking news. About 45 minutes ago, it's been reported that Moscow has said that the Ukraine has fired 6 U.S.-made long-range ATACMS missiles into Russia. They fired 6 American-supplied long-range missiles into Russia's Bryansk region. Moscow said this late yesterday, but I think it's now just being reported. And the use of they're called Army Tactical Missile Systems, known as ATACMS. This comes as President Putin has formally lowered the threshold for using nuclear weapons. This is now opening the door a little wider for a potential nuclear response by Moscow. Folks, this is nothing but irresponsible on behalf of the Biden administration. This is, in fact, we were, I think, briefly talking yesterday with Butch Ware about Prime Minister Olaf Scholz from Germany making a phone call to President Putin to discuss lowering the threshold of conflict, if not trying to find a way to a ceasefire and then later what I would assume to be an end to the conflict. And the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, backed this play. And, you know, if Trudeau is backing a play that is in contradiction to U.S. policy, that is a serious indication that I believe that the geopolitical dynamic is shifting away from what the United States considers to be its best interest. So, again, one has to wonder, what's Joe Biden thinking here? Or probably more in line with Tony Blinken, because he really seems to be the one in the command of this fool's errand. And also, since Vice President Harris, while she was on the campaign trail, loved to say she's in the room while all the important decisions are being made, what does this say about her and her input to this? Because this is utter foolishness. One of the lines that you all know I love to use is smoking at the gas station. And this is, they're filling up their cars with at a Sunoco station with 93 octane, sitting there smoking cigars. This is utter foolishness. So that's the breaking news. We'll get into this a little more with my next guest. But now we're going to shift to, we were told during the 2024 presidential campaign that democracy was on the ballot. And I believe that it was. But the threat to democracy was not limited to Donald Trump and the right. The threat to democracy was also coming from the left and the Biden-Harris administration. Remember Biden's short-lived disinformation governance board that was supposed to be based in the Department of Homeland Security? The board's stated function was to protect national security by disseminating guidance to Homeland Security agencies on combating misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation that they believed threatened the security of the homeland. Basically, boiling it down to its most base elements, deplatforming people from social media who were providing an alternative narrative to the one that the dominant mainstream media was supposed to be parroting. What about the Uhuru 3? Uhuru 3 found guilty on conspiracy, acquitted of foreign agents charges in their landmark trial. What about the attempted extradition of Julian Assange? Well, let's discuss all of this. Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which these events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, what's the status of the Uhuru 3? And my guest is the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, also known as the Uhuru Movement. He's one of the Uhuru 3. He is Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My brother, as always, welcome back to the show.
Well, I want to express my deep appreciation to you, Dr. Leon, and to just appreciate, thank you for giving us this opportunity to be with you again, and hoping with your help to connect the dots for the people during this really critical moment in history. Some of it has already been inferred by your opening. And so I want to express appreciation in terms of what's happening with us. On December 16th, I will be going to Tampa, Florida, the Tampa Middle District Federal Court, where the United States government intends to imprison me for 5 years, along with the two other comrades, and to take all the resources, up to $250,000 for each of us, and so that's what we're looking at right now. And so we're preparing for this sentencing, and you know, some of the stuff you've just raised already in your introduction is that there's some irony to the fact that prior to and subsequent to the presidential election in the United States, there were ongoing warnings that a Trump presidency would place the United States in the grip of fascism, when it was the Democratic liberal Biden regime that initiated the whole Russian scare during this historical moment. And while I have been charged with participating with Russians in terms of interfering in the elections, and this whole election denial thing that has been, imposed on Trump, the fact of the matter is that it was the Democratic Party that initiated this whole Russia thing and in election denial. It was the Democratic Party that said that Trump was an illegitimate president because he didn't win the election. That it was Russia who made it possible, who put him in office. And they're talking about now how the question is whether or not the victor coming into this election that we've just come through, whether or not the loser of the election would accept the outcome of the elections. And that was the case in 2016. They made it the case right now, and they did not accept that in 2016. They said it was the Russians. They did not accept the outcome. And now they're in this interesting kind of situation where they've lost this election. They're not saying it's the Russians who did it this time. Perhaps the Russians lost attention or something to this election. So it was a fabrication from the very beginning. And that's the thing that we're faced now. And you mentioned this whole Biden administration openly now exhibiting the reality that it was the U.S. that's been making this war against Russia, using Ukraine as a vehicle by giving Ukraine the ability to giving them missiles and other leadership, because you're not talking about an army in Ukraine that was prepared with all the logistical stuff that they needed and had to be trained to utilize these weapons they're talking about. It's the United States that deployed these missiles, and they're firing into Russia. And so I am now going to sentencing rather on December 16. One of the charges haven't been levied against us is our opposition to the United States, this United States war on Russia, and something that threatens the whole planet Earth with the possibility of nuclear conflagration. This is what we're looking at. It's an extraordinary place to be in. And I wouldn't be in any other place. And I would have, I'm so happy that we opposed this war from the very beginning. We expressed our right to the free speech. And that's what we are being tried for. Not for theft of any kind of resources, not for bribing anybody about anything, not for gun smuggling, not for drug smuggling or drug use, et cetera, for talking about democratic rights, talking about the genocide being imposed against African people in this country, talking about reparations being due to African people in this country, talking about people around the world to have some understanding and solidarity with the struggle of African people in this country. That's why we're going to Tampa with the U.S. intending to imprison the three of us for 5 years.
So, as I understand it, and again, if I'm misstating this, please correct me. In fact, let's give folks just a little bit of background. You, along with Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, were charged with. You were indicted on bogus charges of being agents of a foreign government or Russian agents, and for basically exercising your free speech to advocate for the liberation of African people, as you've just articulated. On the 29th of July of 2022, the FBI raided your homes and your offices. You all were convicted. You were found guilty of minor charges, but you were charged, I believe, with conspiracy, but the acting as a foreign agent's charge, you were found not guilty of, and you have appealed the conviction. So what do you anticipate to be the outcome of your going back down to Florida for sentencing while, in fact, the appeal is still pending?
Well, first of all, we were, it can be characterized as a lesser charge in terms of the conspiracy charge. Mm-hmm. The charges were two. As you mentioned, one was being an agent of a foreign government, Russia in this instance. And so the jury, the state put on 14 witnesses, and all of them were paid by the government. There were 12 FBI agents, two so-called experts, Russian experts and what have you, one of whom didn't know how much he was being paid or whether he was being paid. Another didn't even know where Russia was located. This is a literal truth. We're going to be showing this. People need to see this and see the actual transcripts that we're talking about. So that was one charge. That was punishable by 10 years in prison, a $250,000 fine. And the other was conspiracy to act as a foreign agent without notifying the Attorney General. So they could not, there's no way in hell they could prove that we were working as a Russian agent. So they lost on that. The jury said no. Everything they saw indicated the only ones we were working for were Black people and other colonized peoples around the world. But then the jury convicted us for conspiring to do something that never happened. They convicted us of conspiring to do something that never happened, and that's punishable by 5 years. So we made a motion. Our lawyers moved that the court should give a direct verdict of not guilty. That the evidence couldn't support anything that this even the ridiculous contradictory conviction shows that. So the prosecution said, no, that's not the case. So we are now going to be sentenced. And the expectation is that the state intends to send us to prison for 5 years, which could be the equivalent of a life sentence for me. Mm-hmm. And to take all of our resources. Our personal resources, which is extraordinary because my wife hasn't been charged with anything, hasn't been convicted of anything. And any resources we have is a consequence of her 20-year employment for a local government in Florida, and the fact that she's been able to utilize that to buy property, because I refused to get life insurance. I didn't want to have, somebody betting on whether or not I was going to die before they made money. And so that is at stake as well. So our freedom is at stake, our resources at stake. And so on December 16th, we'll go to Tampa, Florida for sentencing. And as I said, that the state intends to put me away forever. And whether they can succeed in doing it or not relies a lot on this discussion we're having now, and people hearing and participating openly, so that the state recognizes that the people understand that this is a bogus charge, that it's an attack on the right of Black people to criticize our treatment in this country, and to, in the process, allow America to posture around the world as this great democracy fighting against autocracy, which is difficult to do if African people say anything about our conditions and the history of this relationship is impossible. So we're going, like I said, on December 16th, and that's where the sentencing will occur. And then after the sentencing, we'll be able to appeal. And that's when we'll go to appeal after the sentence. We'll probably do something like a notification of intent to appeal after the sentencing, and move from there.
So what is the practical reality that you are preparing for? Are you preparing for the judge to say 5 years, 250,000, slam the gavel, bailiff, take them away? And then the bailiff comes, puts you in handcuffs, takes you through the side door, and then your attorneys give the motion to not vacate the sentence, but, well, I guess they'll first say vacate the sentence, and then if not, abstain from the implication of the sentence while the appeal is being heard.
Well, the possibilities are that the judge will, at that very moment, remand us. That is, put us in chains, like you suggested, and out the side door to prison. It has been suggested also that a sentence of imprisonment could allow us sometime that we could turn ourselves in directly to the institution where we'll be imprisoned. And then, so that's been the suggestion, that those are possibilities. Each of these is a possibility. It's a possibility that they'll jail us at the moment, they'll sentence us, and then give us some time to turn ourselves into prison. There's a possibility of some kind of probation. It's a possibility of them even saying that the time we've been under effective house arrest for the last 2 years, where even now I have to, on tomorrow, call what is effectively somebody over parole, but it's this pre-sentence guy. I have to call him, and he could come by my house, or I have to, even go into the trial, I have to get permission to leave St. Louis to do that. So though we've been living like this for the last 2 years or so, even before conviction, we were living like this. So the judge could actually sentence us to that time. I don't expect that will occur.
You don't expect that will occur. 1 second here. This is all we're dealing with. We're dealing with moving parts here, dealing with breaking news. So, right. So sorry for the
That's
distraction.
Right. Okay.
Sorry for the distraction. So it's important, a couple of things that you said. First of all, it's important for people to understand that this is happening under the Biden-Harris administration. I cannot stress this enough, as we were told that democracy was on the ballot, and folks, a lot of folks backing the Biden-Harris administration saying, we have to vote for them. We have to vote for them. We can't question anything they say. In fact, Kamala Harris didn't say much. We can't question anything we say because democracy is on the ballot. And you also mentioned the the furor that was created around Russian interference and all of this kinds of stuff. In fact, when the announcement came out that Donald Trump was considering adding Tulsi Gabbard to his administration, Debbie Wasserman Schultz comes on television and she's talking about Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent, even though the stories that she was using to base that allegation on have all been debunked, have all been held out as being lies. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard went as far as to say, Debbie Wasserman Schultz went as far as to say that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent and anti-American because on her own, she went to Syria and met with President al-Assad of Syria. And then Debbie she throws in, who, by the way, has gassed his own people. That story is nothing but a lie, has been debunked. So they continue. Again, Joe Biden wanted to set up the Disinformation Governance Board to deal with misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation, when in fact the Democrats are the ones that are at right now seem to be the most complicit in the crime. Brother,
yeah, I mean, that's the case. I mean, the fact is that in most instances, it doesn't matter which of the parties are there. That we live under colonial domination. We have been for the existence of the entire existence of our people here inside this country, who, unlike others, did not come here looking for a way of life, but lost it as a consequence of having been snatched up and brought here at gunpoint. So we never were assured any kinds of rights. In fact, all the rights that people attain, I mean, white people attained, came at the expense of Africans, came at the expense of the indigenous people who don't even get mentioned here, who living in concentration camps called Indian reservations, with Leonard Peltier, a political prisoner for the last 50 years for trying to defend the reservation that he was located in. This has been our history. And it was, as we talked about it before, it was 1791 before the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, all of these things were ratified. And obviously at that time, African people were property and obviously were not considered forces people who should have the right to vote, make any kind of decisions of our own.
In fact, in the Dred Scott case, the Supreme Court held we have no standing in court because we are not people.
Yes.
And black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect.
That was as recent as 1857. So the thing is that this determination of Bill of Rights and First Amendment rights, that had nothing to do with us. And that's what white people should really understand and be concerned about, because if it was not for us, it was for white people. And if they're attacking us now for something that we never had in the first place, it's an attack. It's an indirect attack on the Bill of Rights, on the First Amendment, on the right to freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and things like that. So it's an attack on you. That's the thing that should be understood. But the government relies on the kinds of prejudices that's deeply embedded in the consciousness of many people in this country, around black people, around Russia, etc. So that they don't expect they have to have any kind of evidence to prove their case. They just say Russia, 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 black people, black people, black people, black people, and Russia, and that should be enough on itself. So even though the jury said these people, they say their verdict indicated that they recognize that we don't work for anybody except black people. They convicted us of conspiring to do something that didn't happen. And that's an extraordinary situation to be in. But
wait a minute, explain that point, because the act you are allegedly conspiring to engage in,
yes,
does not have to happen.
That's right. And that's
for there to be a conspiracy.
That's the critical thing.
Yeah. And it's also very important for people to remember that there was a group of Haitian brothers, I want to say 5 to 7 of them,
down in Miami.
In Miami, that were accused of conspiring to blow up the Sears Tower in Chicago. This was right after September 11th.
Yeah.
Because the Bush administration wanted to demonstrate that there were agents in the United States, that Americans had to be concerned that there were agents in the United States. This war on terror had reached our shores, and it was then found they were not guilty because the FBI it was entrapment, and the FBI had in fact been the ones to plant the seeds of the so-called conspiracy in the first place.
They planted the seeds. They bought them shoes. People didn't even have shoes in some instances. They transported them to Chicago. They gave them the camera and told them what pictures to take, that kind of thing. And so it was a complete entrapment that they were dealing with. But they felt like they didn't have to be able to prove it. All they had to do is prove they were Black people. And there's an assumption here and most of the world that lives under white domination that we are quite susceptible to what they would characterize as being, we're quite susceptible to being in the employ of a hostile entity because of the hostility that the United States government imposes against us all the time. So they see us as suspects. In fact, there's a characterization they've had in England by Black people called sus. Sus. We are all sus. I mean, in this law, sus law, we are suspects as a consequence of the treatment that's imposed on us. So if you complain about the treatment in order to hold on to their own legitimacy as a great democracy, they have to ascribe that to something else. It can't be something that the government is doing to us. It's something that was made up, and there's some conspiracy that's happening to challenge the legitimacy of this wonderful place in the United States. That's the kind of thing that we have to contend with, and we are contending with right now. That's why it's so important for us. So one of the things that we've done, because one of the things they attacked us too, that's why Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, 2 white people, have been charged, because you remember the case of Freedom Summer in 1964, where SNCC brought all of these white people into Mississippi to Freedom Summer because the media was no longer paying attention to the struggle of Black people. They knew that if these white people were there, the media would follow them there. And the first day of Freedom Summer in 1964, 3 people disappeared. They were killed by white nationalists. It was James Chaney, an African. There was Goodman, a white guy, and there was Schwerner. Schwerner. And so they killed Schwerner and Goodman. And these were to be examples to other white people that you do not go in solidarity with the struggle of African people fighting against domestic colonialism. In this instance, Hess and Neville are examples to white people. We are the target. The Black liberation movement is the target, but their objective is to keep us completely isolated. That's why this whole notion of me talking to Russia, but they didn't charge me with going to Spain, and I did in 2017, and then Ireland, all the other places I've been around the world, none of those things were charged with the Russia thing. And so this is part of what we're looking at. And the Genocide Convention was something they paid a lot of attention to, because we collected over 130,000 signatures of people who united with our charge against the United States in terms of violation of the United Nations Convention on Genocide. 130,000 signatures, and the U.S. government took it down. They stole it from it, and they charged us saying that was a Russian thing that was involved in that. So they need to protect this image of the United States being this great democracy that's fighting all of the autocrats around the world, protecting the world from evil, etc., while they're doing these kinds of things to Africans, Palestinians, colonized people inside this country and around the world. This is the struggle that we're involved in, and it's a statement of the not only the hypocrisy but also the fragility of the status quo that exists right now.
And let me add. You mentioned the genocide I want to hold up this book, We Charge
Yes.
Genocide,
Yes.
which was the petition by William Patterson in 1932, I want to say.
It was around 1951, 52.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. To the UN, the book, We Charge Genocide, which the crime of government against the Negro people. And where do people go? How do people help to contribute to the defense fund of the Uhuru 3?
I would hope that people would go to Hands Off Uhuru. That's UHURU, handsoffuhuru.org. And you can get all the information, how to donate, get to Tampa, Florida. We really want to see you in Tampa, Florida. Come to the other kinds of events that we're doing, building up for the December 16th sentencing that's going to occur there.
And let's bring in Scott Ritter. As we mentioned before, Chairman Yeshitela, your home was violated by the United States government. You were placed under arrest. Scott Ritter's home was violated by the government. He was not placed under arrest, but a lot of his materials were seized by the government, his laptop, his phone, and whatnot. Scott, thank you for joining us. We asked you, and on such short notice, we asked you to join us to discuss the breaking news. Moscow says Ukraine fired 6 U.S.-made longer-range missiles into Russia, into the Bryansk region. Moscow announced this yesterday. Today. I'm sorry, earlier today. I get my days confused. Scott Ritter, give us some insight into your understanding of the use of these ATACMS into the Bryansk region in Russia.
Well, I just want to remind everybody first of all, good morning, Chairman.
Good morning, comrade. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And we should never forget that underpinning every discussion we're having is the ongoing battle for free speech. If the U.S. government had their way, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
And we're having this conversation right now at the risk of it being considered a conspiracy.
100%. So, this what we're doing right now, Wilmer, is empowering free speech by telling the government that you don't get to define free speech. Free speech isn't something the government gave to the American people. Free speech is something the American people insisted on and put a First Amendment in to protect, because it is a God-given right or a natural right. It's not something the government gets to decide that you get to have it, you don't get to have it. We all get it, and we must defend it. And I thank you for defending it by inviting us on your program, knowing the risks that are entailed. Now, getting to this, on September 12th, this isn't about Scott Ritter's analysis of the situation. I mean, I have assessed it, and I've been very vocal about my assessment, but let's just state the facts. September 12th, Vladimir Putin said, because Russia understands the reality, the technical realities associated with how the ATACMS is aimed, guided, etc., that this cannot happen without the United States programming the missile, designing the attack parameters, and putting in the missile, etc., that this missile could not be fired against Russia without American hands all over it. Therefore, if an ATACMS missile is fired by Ukraine into Russia, Russia will consider it an attack by the United States in Russia. This isn't Scott Ritter's assessment of what Russia might be thinking. This is a statement by the Russian president that a use of ATACMS missiles on Russian territory will be considered by Russia as an attack by the United States on Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States this morning attacked Russia. Let me make it clear. The United States attacked Russia. Now, the Biden administration is trying to play it off as, no, this is Ukrainian self-defense, but that's not true. Everybody knows that these missiles can't be fired without America guiding them, picking the aim point, designing the attack parameters, enabling the communications. The United States attacked Russia. Now, let's put it in a different perspective. On November 5th, the American people went to the polls and they voted. And the results were a resounding defeat for the Biden-Harris administration and their policies, and a victory for Donald Trump and his policies. I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying that's the reality, whether you like it or not. The American people spoke, and there will be a new president on January 20th whose policies towards Ukraine are diametrically opposed to the policies of the Biden administration. And yet, the Biden administration, after the election, has made a decision to engage in precipitous action, which may lead to a war with Russia, which may lead to a third world war, which may lead to NATO engagement with Russia in combat over Ukraine. Over Ukraine. Ukraine is not an existential problem for the United States. Even if you are a staunch supporter of Ukraine, Ukrainian democracy, Ukrainian sovereignty, and you view what the Russians have done in Ukraine as wrong, the bottom line is America doesn't live or die on Ukraine, except now we will, because we're talking about the potential of a third world war that would be the end of America, a decision being made by a president whose policies were voted on November 5th and found wanting. And yet he's going forward, tying the hands of the Trump administration, trying to prevent them from implementing the mandate they believe they have been given by the American people. This is a frontal assault on democracy taking place as we speak, where a lame duck president is saying, I don't care about the will of the American people. I am going to do something because I don't like the person coming in and I disagree with that person's policies. Democracy is not about imposing your will in dictatorial fashion. The American people went to the polls. The American people voted. They voted for resolving the Ukraine conflict, not escalating the Ukraine conflict. And yet the Biden administration is seeking to escalate because they are in a panic. They know that if Donald Trump comes in on January 20th, with the status quo the way it is, the United States will pull the plug on Ukrainian support and bring an end to this conflict. They are trying to create a new reality. And that new reality is that Ukraine is a part of NATO. If Russia does not respond decisively to this American attack against Russia, there will be continued escalation. Longer range missiles will be provided immediately. NATO forces will deploy onto Ukrainian soil immediately. Polish air defense will extend into Western Ukraine immediately. NATO aircraft will fly over Western Ukraine to protect the Polish air defense immediately. We will be in a third world war with Russia because NATO and the United States believes Russia is bluffing. And if Vladimir Putin doesn't do anything, I mean, I know today Dmitry Peskov gave a press conference where he said, we have signed a new nuclear doctrine and we advise the West to read it. Why would the West read this? They just attacked you. Using your own president's words, you've been attacked by the United States. And if you do nothing, then your doctrine is nothing because nobody will believe your doctrine. They'll just say that you're huffing and puffing, writing down big words, but you have no intention of following through. This is the dangerous situation in right now. The United States has called Putin's bluff. And if Putin is bluffing, then they will continue to double down. And if Putin's not bluffing, we have the potential of third world war.
Two things. One, you said on this show last week that we dodged, I'm going to try my best to quote, I'm going to channel my inner Scott Ritter. We dodged a bullet with this election because had Kamala won, in 6 months, we'd be in World War III. Is this latest move by the administration evidence to support your point? And the second part of this is, it seems as though the militarism posture or footing has shifted from the Department of Defense to the Department of State. This seems as though it has Tony Blinken written all over it, as opposed to Lloyd Austin. And Shelley, thank you for your super sticker. Folks, you all should follow Shelley's lead and provide a few more super stickers. Scott Ritter.
First of all, let's start with that. I did a meme. I'm not normally a meme person, but I'm trying to get in with the modern way of communicating to an American audience. And so I did a meme leading up to this election. And it made reference to the Marvel Avengers movie, Infinity Wars and Endgame. I don't know if you've seen them. I'm not going to explain it to them. But basically, it's the end of the world. And there's a character in there that goes forward in time 14 million plus times, looking at all potential solutions to avoid the end of the world. And he was asked, how many of those did we win? They said one. And it came down to it, the end of the movie where good defeats evil. And instead of saying the catchphrase for the movie, "I am Iron Man," I had the character say, "I am voting for Donald Trump," meaning that it's a desperate situation, 1 in 14 million chance. But when I run the numbers, and when I was running the numbers, the policy formulation of a Harris administration inevitably led to an existential confrontation with Russia that would lead to nuclear confrontation, and we'd have a nuclear war, whether it's 6 months or a year. She would take the Biden administration's intentions, which we see playing out today. If there was any doubt in anybody's mind what the Biden administration intended to do with this conflict, let there be no doubt. They have basically taken a game plan that Tony Blinken wrote that was going to be extended out over the course of 6 months, and they are compressing it into 2 months. And this was their intent. They believe Russia's bluffing. I don't believe Russia is bluffing. If Russia's not bluffing, this inevitably leads to a nuclear war. So we are seeing the Kamala Harris plan play out live in front of us today in a compressed fashion. And if Russia's not bluffing, it will lead to a nuclear war unless it is stopped. But this is very important to point out. Donald Trump, for all of his many faults, anybody who's been following me knows I am not a friend or fan of Donald Trump. But I had a 1 in 14 million chance to save America and the world, and I voted for him. Not because I love him, but because I recognized that Kamala Harris would get us all killed. And the thing that Donald Trump was going to do to save us hinged on his Ukraine policy and his approach towards Russia. How do I know this? Well, I'll give away a little inside information here. I interacted with Bobby Kennedy Jr. When he made the shift. And I wrote him a very lengthy email and said, you need to get the Trump campaign to commit in writing to something about how they're going to end the war in Ukraine and prevent nuclear war. And he and Donald Trump Jr. published an op-ed piece in The Hill, which did just that. And it incorporated a lot of the email that I sent them. That's how I know they're responsive. The Hill article could not have been written without permission of Donald Trump, which means that is the intent of Donald Trump, to bring the Ukraine conflict to an end, to prevent a nuclear war with Russia. That's 1 in 14 million, baby. I mean, it may not be perfect. You may want something else, but that keeps us alive if it can happen. But there's a lot of things conspiring against that. And what we see right now is one of the main things conspiring against that initiative from being implemented is the Biden administration, which is seeking to create its own new reality now by disregarding the will of the American people, which was manifested through their vote, saying we want Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine, to prevent a nuclear war with Russia. And the Biden administration is saying, we don't care what you want. We're going to do this regardless.
Before we go back to Chairman Yeshitela, let me ask you this, Scott. Well, two things. One, we heard the dog barking. Was that Fluffy the Pomeranian? And if it was, do not let Fluffy out, because Fluffy escapes, and then you got to go into the woods and find Fluffy. So if that's Fluffy the Pomeranian, do not let that dog out.
That's Maverick the Pomeranian.
Okay.
And he's my security dog.
Okay.
The last time he barked on August 7th, 40 FBI agents showed up at my front door. So,
Maverick, my man. Maverick, my man. So on the serious side, with Donald Trump being as transactional of an individual as he is, and I personally do not believe that Donald Trump really has a Weltanschauung or a worldview, that his worldview is what's best for me, I will do in the moment. How can you trust, even though Don Jr. and Bobby Kennedy Jr. penned that piece and incorporated your email and your thoughts into it, how can you trust that Donald Trump will actually stick to what is written in that Hill article?
If you notice, my meme didn't say a 1 in 2 chance, a 1 in 5 chance, a 1 in 10 chance.
Okay.
It said 1 in 14 million.
Okay.
Now that's an exaggeration, but there are a lot of variables that argue against Donald Trump following through on his actions. I can't guarantee anything, but I will tell you this. He picked Tulsi Gabbard to be his director of national intelligence. Mm-hmm. Tulsi Gabbard may be a Zionist. She may support Israel blindly, And there's a lot to be faulted for that. But she has been pragmatic and realistic on the worldview, including the need to get out of Ukraine, the need to make prevent a war with Russia. These are core values that she holds. She will be the person briefing Donald Trump every single morning. The first thing he's going to hear every day is Tulsi Gabbard give him a worldview that will shape, because remember, Donald Trump makes policy, nobody else. I don't know what little Marco Rubio thinks he's going to do as Secretary of State. If he thinks he's going to wade in there and make the world as Marco wants, he asked Mike Pompeo how that worked, ask Rex Tillerson how that worked. Donald Trump is a top-down manager. He alone makes policy, and little Marco will be told to salute smartly, implement policy, or leave. Because remember, Marco Rubio isn't somebody that Donald Trump wanted. Donald Trump was paid $100 million by Miriam Adelson to put Marco Rubio in his cabinet. She wanted him as vice president. When Trump said no, she met with him again. Remember, they had that follow-on meeting, and she whispered sweet nothings in his ear, saying, "You won't get a penny if he's not on your cabinet." He said he'll be on the cabinet.
No, so she gave him Big Mac and fries, Scott. She didn't whisper in his ear. She gave him Big Mac, and because she's not his type, Anyway,
she's not his type, but her money is his type. Her money speaks the Donald Trump language. So he picked little Marco. Little Marco, I don't think, at a minimum, at the best case is Marco leaves in 2 years at the midterm. He's not long-term. Worst case is little Marco in about 6 months, 8 months to under a year says, I can't work in an administration that doesn't regard, that ignores me, that doesn't pay attention to me. I'm sitting at my desk doing nothing, and he leaves. And that's okay. He gave him his shot. He's gone. He'll put somebody else in. But I think the most important person that's been picked by Donald Trump is Tulsi Gabbard, and she will bring a very pragmatic, realistic worldview to Donald Trump every morning. And Donald Trump is one of these people that, his actions are predicated on the last person to talk to him. And so every morning, if Tulsi is the one talking to him, I think he wakes up not saying, I want to go to war with the world, but saying, how can I solve world problems? And hopefully that plays out in Ukraine and with Russia.
And Chairman Yeshitela, A Random Jack says only a pathocracy would do what the U.S. is doing. And for those who may wonder or may not have ever heard the term pathocracy, a pathocracy is a system of government where a small group of people with personality disorders gain control over the nation, as in the inmates have taken over at the asylum. What's your thought based upon what you've been subjected to and what you see, the breaking news that we've just talked about developing this morning? What's your thought about Random Jack and his point about only a pathocracy would do what the U.S. is doing?
Well, I wish it were possible to define it in terms of some kind of pathology. I think that Trump's administration this time is going to be different from the first time. Not simply because the first time he just put people in there who had not been properly vetted or something to that effect. I think something else is happening in the world. I think that there has been a major transformation of the political and economic configuration of the planet Earth. I think it's happening right before our eyes, and we see much of that. And Russia is a factor in that. Even Brzezinski, who was an advisor of Obama and what have you, had tried to put together a policy direction that would have the United States learn how not to attempt to be the empire, the head of the empire, but to bring other forces in and have this kind of collective leadership with the U.S. leading from behind. That was Obama. Remember, everybody complaining because Obama's leading from behind, because that was the Brzezinski doctrine that they tried to implement, and it didn't work because the United States was determined not simply to allow China and Russia to be on the same team, but to be on its team. It was going to give direction. And so I think that what you see with the movement of Trump and all of the forces who came into many of them, his administration, all of them were condemned, many of them charged, some jail for being agents of Russia and what have you. Because there is another generation, another element of economic interest in this country that wanted to penetrate into Russia, into that area. Tremendous amount of resources in Russia that had been kept off limits to some of the economic sectors in this country, and they wanted it open. And Trump was hungry for it as well, and so were other people around him. That's why they went to jail. And I think that they are convinced that Trump will do something different in Ukraine, and that's one of the problems. That because Russia plays a really important role, and not because it's so democratic and progressive, but because it has interests that would challenge and upset the apple cart, especially coming from
anti-imperialist interests.
Well, it's the whole Atlanticist group. The Atlanticist group that's dominated the world for the last 25 years, that gave birth to NATO, gave birth to the United Nations, gave birth to most of the trade relationships that's out there today. Trump assaulted that. And that's something that's in sort of a disintegration. So all of the Atlantic powers, were opposed to Trump. If you remember, England played a big role also in giving the thing about Russia to the Democratic Party. Okay. I think this is part of what the disruption is. And so there are instruments that Trump will try to utilize to carry out this, but there are economic interests, powerful economic interests at play too. That's the only thing I would say. Okay. And I also say this, that this should help us to understand the relationship of the domestic politics, if you will, and what's happening in the world. Kamala Harris would have been a fundamental contradiction, real big problem. Her election would have been a real big problem because it would have validated everything that Biden has done up to now. Biden was against the civil rights bill. Biden put the 100,000 cops in the streets of this country that led to George Floyd and all the other forces out there. Biden has not been a Democrat, and it's Biden administration that attacked my home at 4:00 in the morning while we were told if Trump gets elected, Trump is a proto-fascist. We got fascism to be looking for. Trump forces, are the ones who fought against. It was Trump forces who were talking about the weaponization of the CIA and the FBI and things like that, and holding those kinds of hearings in Congress. And we're looking at it. We've experienced it historically. For the last 60 or more years, the FBI has been attacking me for doing what? Working in the Black community to try to change conditions for Black people, not Trump. So the thing is, colonialism is a mother. And so it doesn't really matter which administration as such is in place. It's what the policies are. What is it that they stand for? Where are they trying to drive the political situation? And how is that favorable or unfavorable to the conditions of the people? And also, the fact that they plan to put me in prison December 16th, in part because of my opposition to what they were doing in Ukraine. Stated up, and that came out in the trial. They had FBI agents who were there on the stand, who had taken an oath to tell the truth, etc., who testified that we did nothing to interfere with Russians in the elections in this country. And yet I'm convicted of conspiring to do this kind of stuff. And who did something to interfere with the election? The Justice Department, they attacked my home. They attacked my home in part because of our participation in the damn elections around reparations.
Well, I know who admitted to being involved in interfering in the election, AIPAC, because they published an article in the New York Times in April of this year saying they were going to spend $100 million on the Democratic primary to unseat as many what they consider to be anti-Israel Democrats as possible. I know who admitted to doing it. Scott, let me ask you that. First of all, Unemployed Scholar, thank you much for that super sticker. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Scott, your thoughts on what Chairman Yeshitela, you were nodding in affirmation to a lot of that. And also, G-Man says, do you think Harris handlers would have allowed her to go into war? Let's be serious. G-Man, let's be serious. Look at the move that was just made. She's a part of the administration. says that she's in the room while all the decisions are being made. And when asked what she would do different than Joe Biden, she has no answer. Scott Ritter.
Well, just to further that too, there was talk early on in the Harris campaign, and I understand this was an abbreviated campaign because she wasn't elected, she was selected. This was a coup launched against Joe Biden by Democratic Party elites. But early on, she indicated that she might surround herself with a different advisory team, that her State Department, her national security advisor would be different. Later on, she said, no, I'm going to keep Blinken, I'm going to keep Sullivan, and keep the same team. So that answers your question, doesn't it? The question of the person watching this show. It answers exactly. We know exactly what she would have. Do I think her handlers would have her handlers are the same handlers that are handling Biden.
Yeah.
So and handled Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Because
so
she's a Hillary Clinton acolyte.
And Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken are a product of the Clinton camp. They worked for Clinton. So we know what the answer is. I don't know why this person believes that it would be anything other than this. But now, Chairman Omali, that you know has something in common. Now I'm going to say something, and please don't be offended what I'm going to say, but there's a reason why I'm about to say it. You, me, and Donald Trump have something in common. The FBI went through our wives' underwear drawers. Mm-hmm. Now, for you and me, it's just it's just part of what the overall insult. Donald Trump has taken that aspect to a new level. Of all the things the FBI did, that one has angered his wife, and therefore he has. But it's part and parcel of the invasive process. A federal law enforcement agency, because they are angry with words we have spoken, came into our houses and violated the sanctity of the home. The sanctity of the home, the sanctity of the bedroom, the sanctity of the underwear drawer of our wives. Yes. They had no damn reason to go up there and rifle through that, or rifle through yours, or rifle through Donald Trump. None whatsoever, other than to say we can. Yes. They are like the dog that goes in and pees on everything to mark the territory. And they came into my house and they pissed all over my stuff. They did it to your house and they did it to Donald Trump. And you know what? That will not stand. Chairman, I can't guarantee the future for you. I don't know what the judge is going to do on December 16th. They will probably sentence you to prison. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you this. I will do everything in my power to make sure that one of the first actions of the Trump administration is to make null and void your conviction, because it is a criminal conviction based upon the same criminal actions of the FBI that have targeted me and Donald Trump. If the rumors are true, there won't be too many people left in the Department of Justice and the FBI on January 20th, because they're all quitting because they know what's about to come down. If they take apart your file, I can guarantee this, Chairman, you put me in charge. That Matt Gaetz, are you listening? Put me in charge of reviewing Chairman Omali's FBI file and give me the power to indict every single FBI agent and every single Department of Justice agent that violated his civil rights knowingly. No. And let me put them in federal prison. Man, the federal prisons will fill up. They'll have to build all new prisons to put it. And if you did that to my case and went there and got the FBI agents who got a judge to sign off on probable cause to come into my home because of free speech, and they said it's about free speech. They are mad at me, Chairman, because I dared sit down and interview the Russian ambassador, Anatoly Antonov, about the dangers of Russophobia, an interview that was initiated by me in writing in an email. He came in, we talked. Part of the results is he gave me an article that he wrote. He said, in the past, I could place this in the New York Times or the Washington Post, but nobody will touch it. I took the article, broke it up, incorporated it into a larger piece I wrote, and they said, I'm taking direction from the Russians.
Yes.
I won't disgrace Wilmer by giving you the response I gave him, but it began with an F and it ended with off. Yeah. They don't get to do this. They are doing it, but they don't get to do it. And for the first time in American history, we have a revolutionary. That's the other thing you and Donald Trump have in common. Mm-hmm. You may not have the same goals, you may not have the same objectives, but he is as revolutionary as you are. He is seeking revolutionary transformation of this country. And one of the things he's going to do is take down the edifice of injustice that is the Justice Department and the FBI. And I will do everything to do my best to have your case one of the first cases reviewed, because this is the battle of free speech. Elon Musk and everybody talks about how important free speech is. Your case, the Uhuru 3, is the first fight. This is the Lexington and Concord of the battle in defense of revolutionary free speech. And we must defend you. We must step up. There will be an injustice on the 16th. I know there will be, because this is the Biden administration. They sent them into your home to go through your wife's underwear drawer. They will do anything to include sentencing you to jail. Unfortunately, Chairman, you are going to spend some time in a federal prison. My goal is to make the time you spend less than a couple months, to get you out and to have you to make sure America understands the injustice that has been done to you and your cause, so that then you can get on with the business of trying to convince people like me that your cause is just, that your cause is right. As I've told you all along, I love listening to you every time you speak. Just Wilmer, he just corrected you on something. This man is an encyclopedia of knowledge. His facts are 100% correct. His analysis, I trust, but we need to have more conversations, Chairman. We need to have discussions and stuff to win it over. I'm not an easy person to win over. I'm a 63-year-old man who is set in my ways, okay? But I'm willing to listen. But in order for me to listen, you have to be able to speak. And we have to make sure that you have the right to speak, you have the ability to speak, so people like me can listen to your message and we can decide what to do about it, because something needs to be done about it. There is an injustice taking place in St. Louis. There's an injustice taking place in St. Petersburg, in Washington, D.C., around the world, in Philadelphia. Every place there is a Black community, there is injustice. There is racism in America today that must be addressed. I don't know what the solution is. You say you have one. I'm willing to listen and work with you on this one. But I can't listen if you can't speak. You have a right to speak. And we have a duty to let you speak. And so I am going to go to war for you, because it's not just for you, it's for me. It's for all Americans. This is the American battle. This is the Lexington and Concord of the war for free speech.
Let me,
Doctor?
In 1 second, Charles Messina, I'm not going to read your message. I'll only say to you now, based upon what Scott just said, what do you think now? Because I think you're wrong. Chairman, your thoughts.
I just wanted to say the one comforting thing of this moment is that this election that just occurred demonstrated quite clearly the diminishing influence of certain forces that's held incredible persuasive powers in this country up to now. It has been shows like this one, shows like Scott Ritter, shows like even the one that the FBI intercepted that we did with the burning spear, that made the difference in this election. It was not the New York Times. It was not even the Washington Post at that time. It was not even the the other major entities. Certainly it wasn't CNN. All of them went against Trump and went for Harris to no avail. It didn't work. And what was happening was there were these forces who were independent of this mainstream powerful media industry that helped to bring the message to the people, had to go around like this discussion. This is a matter of national security. They said that they're imprisoning me for. Where is CNN? Where's the New York Times? Where's the Washington Post? Where's Huffington Post? Where are all of those other entities? They are silent. They are engaging in self-censorship. And it's this discussion and the work that we are doing now is reaching to people who ordinarily do not have access to information that makes the difference. And so I just wanted to say, I think that's really important and something that should encourage us to continue to push this struggle forward. And I agree with what Comrade Scott Ritter has just said. And the fact is that there are a lot of forces now who are running for cover, but there are probably many of them, that's even as we look at the sentencing, even if we look at how the Justice Department is working against us, that may attempt to do what Biden is doing in Russia now by attacking Russia, to create a consequence that locks the Trump administration into a position that is very difficult for it to get out. That's an aggressive position against Russia. And these charges and trial that this charges and sentencing we're facing on the 16th may seem a lame duck administration striking out again at that moment in court. So I think it's a great probability that I will be in prison on the 16th. And but I didn't get involved in this movement to keep me out of prison. And so I just want to make that point. And also, Scott, I want to say that I know that you had various kinds of issues and attacks against you at different times. And I know that whatever the essence of those attacks, the basis of those attacks and how they're being raised and how they're being pursued, it revolves around this attack, around the Russia question, the need to characterize you in a certain way so that they would delegitimize what it is that you've been trying to do, your right to free speech around to raise Russia and all of these other issues. So I just wanted to say that I recognize that from the very beginning, and you know, even as we're having this discussion, we're facing charges. We sent you a message. One of the attacks that's being made on us when an economic development program that we engaged in St. Louis, Missouri, the so-called food desert, where we're bringing food and what have you. The headline on the major newspaper here is saying that group convicted of being, Russian, working with Russia, etc., putting this denied the right to open up a bakery cafe in a food desert. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we're running into. Somebody who ran for office. We ran for office in 2021. An article appears yesterday in the newspaper. A group who accused of conspiring with Russia, etc., who had candidates in 2021 have been fined $40,000, for, and it's a garbage kind of charge. But this is the kind of stuff that's happening constantly. The struggle has involved so much stuff. I mean, not only raising our homes, but burning of churches that we were in the process of purchasing for economic development programs in St. Louis. A myriad of various kinds of break-ins, thefts of computers and passports and stuff like that that's been going on. So the banks, having banks sanction us so that like we're a foreign government or something to that effect. This is the kind of stuff we are dealing with right here. And I'm glad that you're here, Scott, because one thing that I've appreciated about your being here, people criticize me for being being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, but I said I want to talk to white people. You understand? Because the so-called left has no relationship to white people. It's just this narrow circle that they talk to each other with, etc. I want access to those people. I want access to people who love Scott Ritter because he's a patriot. I want to be able to talk to them because I know that I can defend our position, but the Biden administration can't. That's why they would attack us. They don't want us to talk. Man, let's have a debate. I would debate Joe Biden, Kamala Harris today, 30 minutes from now, if they would have that. But they don't want that to occur. That's why they don't want us in elections. That's why they want us to put reparations on the election, the genocide question on the election, gentrification on the ballot. They don't want that on the ballot because that's the best opportunity to have a discussion with the people inside this country and the various communities that we live in. And they don't want that, not just because they don't want me to talk, but because, as Scott just mentioned, they don't want people to be able to hear what we've got to say. So they define the issue. Kamala Harris represents Black people. Obama represents Black people. And the only reason that seems to be the case is because they won't let anybody else talk.
Daniel Drazenovich, hang on one second, Scott. Daniel Drazenovich, thank you so much for that super sticker. Scott, your response, and also let me ask you to speak to this. I think it was during our interview, and Unemployed Scholar, thank you for your super sticker as well. I think I was talking to you, and you made the point that once the button gets pushed in Washington, for military action, you can't push the stop, but once you hit play, you can't hit stop. And you were talking about that's what happened in Iraq with and in fact, someone listening to the show challenged my making this statement, but I know the statement was true, that Saddam Hussein sent a letter to George Bush a week before the invasion saying, please do not invade my country. I will do what you want me to do. Just don't invade my country. And George Bush's response was, it's too late for that. The wheels are already in motion. So the Biden administration seems to have pushed the play button. And can you speak? I know you've alluded to this, but can you get into just a little more detail about how difficult it will be for a President Trump to hit the stop button now that play has been punched? Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes plenty of sense. I just want to start off by reiterating, Chairman Omali, you couldn't have picked a more white person than me. So good job. I mean, I'm as white as it gets. So in every way, shape, or form, the good and the bad. My daughter and I have discussions. I have twin daughters. One is very conservative and more of a Donald Trump kind of person. The other one is a very progressive liberal. They're twins. Amazing. One's left-handed, one's right-handed. They love each other, but they have different worldviews. The one that
is the right-handed daughter the Trump supporter?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, again, a family of contradictions. But my daughter, who lives in Washington, D.C., is a big supporter of Black reparations, and she continuously is on my case about white privilege, and that I'm blind to, that I may not myself be a racist, but that my indifference towards the concept of white privilege empowers racism. I mean, she and I have these discussions all the time. So you couldn't have picked more.
You need to listen to your daughter because she's right. But anyway, go ahead.
You couldn't have picked a more white person than me, because apparently I'm not just colored white, but I am the living embodiment of white privilege. So I'm learning. Like I said, I'm all in the receive mode and letting my little brain, what's left of it, rumble on this thing. But when we talk about the concept of irretrievable war, what we're speaking of is what I call the tip fiddle, and that it's not what I call it; it's what it used to be called. I don't know what they call it today, but that's a term that was used back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. But it's a timed phase line of deployment of logistics. But basically, to go to war, if I want to put 10 divisions online to fight a war, that's what I need to fight a war. I not only have to get them there, but I have to get all of the equipment, the material, the logistics there to support it. I have to have basing infrastructures. I have to have agreements made, status of forces agreements. There's a whole bunch of stuff. This doesn't happen overnight. So in order to get those 10 divisions deployed, I have to begin well prior, coming up with all the diplomatic support, the logistics support, identifying the forces, getting the forces marshaled, getting political support for this, and getting them pushed in. And early on, when it's just talk, you can reverse that. But once you start committing forces, material movement, once that system gets engaged, you can't stop it. It's going to happen. And that's what happened. I'll give you a little story. One of the reasons why I know what they say about Saddam Hussein is true is that in January, I was working with the Iraqi government on what I called a 6-point plan of peace. Basically, I was going off of Ari Fleischer's statement in December that the Bush administration wasn't looking for, when they said regime change, it didn't mean the physical change of Saddam's regime, but a change in how Saddam interfaced with the world. That if the regime changed how it behaved, that the Bush administration could live with that. So I reached out to Tariq Aziz and I said, this is a chance and we need to take it. I reached out to Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, the South Africans were engaged, and we had a delegation that Bishop Tutu was going to be on Nelson Mandela was going to go, but he was too old and fragile. So Tutu was going to go in. I was going to go in, and we were going to meet with the Iraqis in Iraq, and they would sign a 6-point plan of peace that committed them to 6 things that would change the regime. This was happening. This was going to happen. You know how it stopped? The FBI released to the press that I had an interaction with the police 2 years prior, and they didn't say that it was dismissed, that there was nothing there. They said this shows that Scott Ritter is a person of bad character.
Exactly.
Chairman Omali, let's put words. You say they say things. We know what they say. They call me a twice convicted pedophile.
Yeah.
That's their thing. Scott Ritter is a twice convicted pedophile.
Yeah.
First of all, there's no aspect of that statement that's true. I haven't been convicted twice. I was convicted once in a sham trial, but I'm not going to go into that because that's playing their game. And I'm not a pedophile.
Right on.
It's clearly not even close. There's no victim. There was no intent for a victim. There was no crime committed.
Right.
End of story. I'm at the point, but let me tell all those people out there that say that. Show me how many twice convicted pedophiles have 430,000 followers on X. Show me how many twice convicted pedophiles have 200,000 followers in Telegram. Tell me how I can have 50,000 followers on my Substack, because there are so many people out there that recognize that this just A, it's not true, and B, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter. To be honest, if I was a twice convicted pedophile, I could have people say, I'm not really want to listen to. But because it's not true, that's a discussion that has no bearing on what we're talking about. Exactly. Free speech, stopping a nuclear war, etc. I have stopped caring about these things. I used to get a little insulted and get my umbrage up, want to fight everybody. At this point in time, I don't care, because it's not true. And the people saying that are only underscoring their intellectual vacuousness. They have no ability to engage on the critical issues of the time. They can't engage. Therefore, this is their go-to move. It just exposes them as the intellectually weak, fraudulent people that they are. I don't care. Chairman Omali, never be afraid to say what people call me. Twice convicted pedophile. Say it, scream it, shout it. Not because you're saying it's true, but because you're highlighting the point that you don't agree that it's true and you don't care about the words. Right. They don't matter. If we run from the words, we somehow imply that I'm running from the issue. I ain't running from anything. I gave up a long time ago giving one damn about these morons. And so twice convicted pedophile, you're so wrong. And if you say it, it just shows how fundamentally stupid you are.
Slander is a substitute. It's a substitute for actual debate. They can't struggle. They can't make the struggle, so they slander. To liquidate the struggle, they will use slander. In every
just like they call you a Russian asset.
That's all. That's not the only thing they've called me.
Oh no, I know what they call you. I've read it too.
I'm not. Yeah, they've called me all kinds of things, man. I mean,
but that means that they don't want to engage with you on the issues that matter, because they can't engage. They're afraid to engage, and they're looking for an excuse not to engage. So they throw these slanders out there, these libels, and all that stuff. But you're a big man. I've met you. You're not just physically imposing. Hey Wilmer, if I look half as good as this guy does when I'm 80, I'm going to live to be 1,000,000. I mean, my God, I don't know what your diet is or your physical fitness program is, but you are a stud.
Let me say this, and I'm not saying this to put anybody on blast, but I do also have to take the opportunity to promote what I do. I'm working with Chairman Yeshitela's folks to get him on my Sirius XM show on Saturday from 11 to 12. And again, Scott, I'm not putting you on blast, and I'm not even going to ask you to acknowledge anything, but I am going to reach out to you to see if you can join us as well. Just putting that thought in your head. I'm not asking for any commitments at this point.
I will tell you this. I have a boss. Her name is
Mrs. Ritter.
Mrs. Ritter.
And Fluffy the Pomeranian.
And then Maverick has a vote too, because he is security.
I
will run this by them. Saturdays are sacrosanct, but I will tell you this. Normally she knows that I'm, Don Quixote tipping at windmills. She knows I'm out there fighting all these fights. And sometimes she says you just got to take a break and you got to focus on you. Chairman Omali, with you, she said, this is a fight that you have to fight. So I'm fairly confident that I can get her to let me do something on Saturday. I can't promise, but I will do my best.
Well, we appreciate
it. And if I may just add something too, what to what Wilmer said. Ladies and gentlemen, understand right now that we are engaged in information warfare today.
Yes.
We have an administration that is trying to destroy Chairman Omali, trying to destroy me, trying to destroy Wilmer, trying to destroy everybody that dares speak out. They use legacy media to do that. They deny us access to, Chairman Omali said, where's CNN? Where's MSNBC? Where's CBS? Where is Washington Post, New York Times on the fundamental fight of free speech of our time? They're nowhere to be found, because the whole reason they went after Chairman Omali is because he's a black nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that white people like me won't care, that we're just going to say, oh, black nationalism, tune out. They brought it on themselves. It's their fault. They're running around causing trouble. I mean, they don't even know what you do, but they just assume nefarious intent. And so they picked on you so that they can score this major victory against free speech, and then use as a platform to come out people that look just like me. That's what's happening here. But here's the thing. They're losing. Not only was there a revolution on November 5th, but the legacy media is losing.
Yes.
Wilmer, there's a good chance that this podcast will get more views than CNN's leading show. They are in collapse, free fall, MSNBC. Yes. But this only happens if people support it. And so this is what I'm going to say. If you see that banner going down there on the bottom for Wilmer, if you want this program to continue, if you want Chairman Omali to have a voice, to have a platform, you better support Wilmer Leon. Keep this show viable. You better support every single one of the alternative media people out there. If you think that this is the platform that you get your news from, if you think this is value, if you think this is empowering, it doesn't happen for free. You have to support the voices that you support. You have to donate. And believe me, in this game, if you get tens of thousands of viewers and they each provide $1, you suddenly have the ability not only to continue, but to expand, to improve the product, to get to do things that you can't otherwise do. If you want an alternative to legacy media, you have to support the alternative legacy media. So not only tune in, but that banner down there tells you exactly how to support Wilmer Leon and support him. Give him that $1, that $2. I'm somebody that goes out and I have I'm gonna get in trouble here, but every once in a while when I come home in the morning, I swing by McDonald's and I get that, that steak, egg, and cheese bagel, which you're not supposed to eat because it's horrible for you. I eat it. I have made a decision, and it costs more than I care to admit. I mean, these things are expensive nowadays. I've made a decision to forego breakfasts, and I say that money is going to go and I send it off to support a podcast. So I give up something that is easy to give up, that costs money. I'm not asking people to stop paying their mortgage. I'm not asking you to stop paying what I'm asking to do is if you swing in and get that Starbucks latte every Thursday, maybe don't. Yeah. Maybe take that money and give it to an alternative media source that you listen to and support so they can keep doing what they do. This is the kind of sacrifice we all have to make sure that legacy media is defeated and alternative media becomes mainstream.
Right on.
And Scott, to your point about your daughter, Penny Hess just posted that they met your daughter at a rally. We met Scott's daughter at the Black is Back march on the White House a couple of weeks ago. So, folks, Scott Ritter ain't blowing smoke. He never does. But she was cited. So Scott is.
Well, and I'll tell you this: my daughter, she likes me, she respects me, but I'm a Ronald Reagan conservative white dude. And she is like, no.
Maybe we can say you're recovering Ronald
Reagan.
Okay,
I'm recovering. But what I'll say this is when we walked away from that, when she had to leave, she came up and she said, that was so cool. And you're pretty cool too. You hang around with cool people. Right so on. Hey, you know what? I'm doing something.
Right on. So let me do this. And Scott, thank you so much for that endorsement. Folks, I've been following Scott. I've been on the air almost 25 years. And I remember the name UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter. That's right. I was mentioning that name. Ray McGovern and I used to talk about you when Ray first started coming on my show, the Wilmer Leon show. Yeah. On WOL, and then it became Inside the Issues on Sirius XM. You were this kind of mythical figure. UN Weapons Inspector Scott Ritter said. And
now you know the reality.
Yeah, before we knew anything about you, it's wonder
Right.
who is this guy?
Who's this guy, Scott Ritter? But so let me do this, because as we wrap up, I want to give both of you 2 minutes, 3 minutes. What do you want? And I'll start with you, Chairman Yeshitela. What do you want the audience to take away from this conversation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela?
Well, I think, first of all, the audience must assume the responsibility of agency. The people must. That free speech is not just something that somebody gifts us. It's ours. And in order for us to exercise it, we have to exercise it. In order for us to keep it, we have to exercise it. If they can do this to me, if they can do this to Scott Ritter and other people to shut us up, then we will forfeit our right to free speech. It's a critical question. It's not a small question. And we think in language. You know, more than that, I've used the analogy that biblically, for those who are Christian, you would have run, I think, someplace in Mark. The statement is, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was in God, and the Word was God. And it's a powerful statement about speech. The Word written there. It's a biblical thing. And you think about the fact that if the FBI, the Justice Department, had been in charge of this whole process, we may not have God because the Word would have been denied. And so that's the thing that I think this significance of free speech is critical. Also, go to handsoffuhuru.org. Learn everything about us. We are open to, we are very transparent. Come to St. Louis, see our projects. Come to St. Petersburg, Florida. Visit with us, go to our sites, and you won't necessarily agree with every damn thing, but you're going to hear stuff you never had an opportunity to agree or disagree with. And that's fulfilling. So I want to thank you again, because we are in a war of ideas right now. It's a critical moment in the history of the planet Earth, and we have an opportunity to play an amazingly significant role if we will assume agency. I want to see everybody possible on December 16th, Tampa, Florida. Let's go to the court. Let's make the impossible for the court to contain the number of people who will be there to expose the fact that we know what is happening, bring it all to daylight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And let me say a couple of things. One, Jonathan Soul, thank you so much for that $10 super sticker. Thank you. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Chairman Yeshitela, you said that the freedom of speech is given to us. That is not given to us, that it is ours. That is why the First Amendment is written in the manner in which it is. It doesn't say all Americans have the right to free speech. It says the government shall make no law.
That's right.
That's called a negative right.
Yeah.
Because it is an affirmation of protection stated in a negative context. The government shall make no law. I learned this in law school, folks.
Yeah.
Not only am I political. I'm not an attorney, but I did go to law school. The government shall make no law. That is not a protection of, well, it is a protection of your right by prohibiting the government from infringing upon it. That shows you how serious the framers of the Constitution took this protection. You have to understand that. Scott, I'll throw it to you. What do you want the people to take away from this conversation?
Well, first of all, let me just reemphasize everything that you and the chairman just said. Study American history, Thomas Paine, common sense. This all took place before the Constitution was written. We fought a revolution because we said we have the right to speak freely, to freely associate, free press, that the British tyranny cannot come in and infringe on that. We fought a revolution and we won. We, the people of the United States of America, victorious. And we said what defines us is free speech. So when it came time to write a constitution, we already had this. We weren't asking the government to give it to us. We were saying the government that we, the people, are deciding to form shall pass no law that infringes on the right that we possess. We. But here's the problem, and Chairman Omali brings this up all the time. We were people like me. They look like me. They were white like me. You know who didn't have the right of free speech even after the Constitution was written? Black people, women. This was the reality. So, there was an issue. Now, why do I bring that up? Because we, the white people, have forgotten. What color were the people that primarily went into your house wearing the FBI uniform, Chairman Omali? You don't have to answer that question. I know the answer. They were white people. The color of the people that came into my house were primarily white people. The FBI is populated by white people. White people are launching a frontal assault against free speech on the American people. But they don't view Chairman Omali as an American person. You see, Chairman Omali is black. And part of the systemic racism that exists in the United States today is the fact that black people were never supposed to have these rights. You weren't supposed to have the right of free speech.
You're channeling your daughter.
Well, I'm challenging you. You educated me on this point. I listened to you, everything you say. And I sat back and I listened because I have to be honest, I was a little insulted when you first said it because I'm ignorant and I have prejudices. And when you said it, you insulted me. You made me feel that I was under attack. But then I went back and reflected and I went, he's right. And the fact is, the reason why I bring this up isn't to talk about injustice and all this kind of stuff. It's to point out that who is defending free speech more in America today? White people like me who don't realize the gift that we have and that we're giving away by empowering white people who wear a uniform that says FBI to go in and attack Americans because they dare speak out. No, the greatest defender of free speech today are the people that had to fight for the right to say it is my right. The black people, after they were freed as slaves, they still didn't have free speech. And today they still don't have free speech, or else the FBI wouldn't have picked the Uhuru 3 as the place to attack first in this war on free speech. So the fact of the matter is the greatest defenders of free speech in America today are black people because they understand what's at risk. They had to fight for the rights. We didn't have to fight. We had the rights. We fought a revolution, but we had the rights. We ensured Congress couldn't take that right away, and then we sit back and do nothing as Congress does exactly that. The Foreign Agent Registration Act is a law passed by Congress. The First Amendment says Congress shall pass no laws that infringe on our right of free speech, and yet the Foreign Agent Registration Act is a law that infringes on free speech because they are prosecuting the Uhuru 3, and they came after me because of what we said. Not what we did, but what we said, what we spoke, what we wrote. They can't do that. That is the most un-American thing in the world. And people don't look at Chairman Omali and say that is a black man. Yes, he is obviously a black man. Look at him and say he is an American patriot fighting the fight for all of us. This free speech fight is the fight of America's future. And we must emerge victorious. This is the most important thing. This is the most important struggle there is. If we lose the right, because there's people out there right now that say, what about Israel? What about Zionism? What about Gaza? Well, you know what? There won't be any discussion if they take away your free speech. And understand this. First, they came for the Uhuru 3. And you did nothing because you weren't the Uhuru 3. Then they're going to come to the people that speak out. They're going to call you anti-Semite. They're going to play word games. You dare speak out in defense of a Palestinian state, you are anti-Semitic. Now they're going to come for you, and no one's going to do anything. And eventually, they're going to come for the Second Amendment people. I don't care where you stand on Second Amendment. I'm just telling you that you have a right to say what you want to say, and they're going to come to you for that. They're going to come to you for everything. The government views free speech as the enemy, and they're going to come in and they're going to take it away from you. And that's what they're doing. And that's why the fight that Chairman Omali and the Uhuru 3 are fighting right now is the fundamental fight of our times. And every American needs to understand that. And every American needs to rally around them. Not because you support what they're saying, although I do believe if you give them the time of day, you will end up supporting a lot of what they're saying, but because you support their right to say it. And that is an American right, a right that we white people take for granted. There ain't a black person in America today, I believe, that takes for granted any of these rights because they have had to fight too damn hard to get these rights brought to them, kicking and screaming by white people who said, we don't want to give you these rights. We don't view you as being American people like we are. You are lesser. Women are still fighting that. We had to have the 19th Amendment to give women the right to vote. And today women still face a glass ceiling because of white men like me who, for deliberately or whether it's just passively, are opposing this. We take umbrage. And again, I'm guilty of it. When I first heard of Uhuru 3, I did the research, went, oh, black nationalists. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I can support this. I don't know. And then I went, what the hell are you doing? This is free speech. This is the biggest fight there is. And then I reached out. And said, I want to get you guys on my show. I want to talk to you about this. We need to have a dialogue about who you are, your right to speak, and the duty of Americans to give you that right to speak, and therefore listen and begin the dialogue, the debate that makes America the greatest potential country on the planet. But we are in a revolution right now.
Yes.
And here's the last thing I'll say this, Wilmer. For all Americans who lost faith in democracy, and I was one of them, we talked about the duopoly. We talked about it doesn't matter who you vote for, you're going to get the same. This election was different. This election proved that democracy works. Now, you can be people out there who hate Donald Trump and say, I voted against him. I don't support this. But you're missing the point. A sufficient number of American people came together and rallied around this non-traditional candidate, a candidate that the establishment was never going to pick, a candidate the establishment tried to destroy. Legally, they tried to murder him. Remember, if it weren't for one inadvertent last-second twitch of the head, he'd be dead.
Yeah.
They tried to kill him, to imprison him, to silence him, and the American people, through the democratic process, voted for him, and we are looking at the potential of revolutionary change. Democracy works if we make it work. And if you don't agree with Donald Trump, then come together and form a counter movement. Find a good candidate. Find something you believe in that you can get more votes than Donald Trump, and vote in the next election. That's what this country is all about. But for the first time in a long time, I have faith in democracy. You know why? Because I started something in September 29th. I called it Operation Dawn. And the reason why I bring this up is I think the FBI is probably going to arrest me for this. Operation Dawn was 4 questions I challenged the American people. What would you do to save democracy, to save America, to save the world through your vote in November? And I was advocating making prevention of nuclear war one of the top issues of this election. And I guess I'm going to be accused of Russian propaganda, of putting out a Russian point of view, but it's the most fundamentally American point of view. The Russians have nothing to do with this. I have no say in it, but the FBI will twist it, turn it, and do something with it. But I empowered myself by believing in the potential of democracy, believing that if we have a discussion, a debate, a dialogue, if we use these platforms to inform the American people, that ultimately the American people, once they're exposed to the issues that matter, will make the right decision. And I'd like to believe that I played a role in facilitating the changes that occurred on November 5th, the revolution that's about to occur, fundamental changes that are being demanded by the majority of the American people and will be enacted by representatives they voted into office. That's what representative democracy is about. Now, hopefully, Donald Trump will make sure that this mandate is implemented in a way that conforms with the constitutional requirements of a constitutional republic. I'm not talking for dictatorship. I'm not talking for any deviation. I'm talking about a revolution of change within the 4 corners as defined by the Constitution of the United States. And it can happen. And I believe it will happen. And this is an empowering moment for Americans. Never again can you say our vote doesn't count because nothing ever changes. Ladies and gentlemen, everything's getting ready to change because of your vote.
Shelley just posted, and this is to Scott, admitting your own flaws publicly takes a great deal of integrity. I can't agree with that more.
I just push back. I don't view anything about me to be a flaw because I'm human. Therefore, I am already flawed.
Well,
the notion that I'm somehow perfect, that everything I do is flawless, is absurd. What I do know about this earth is that I came into this earth imperfect, and I am imperfect today, and I will die imperfect. I will make mistakes. I will have bad judgment, but I'm an intelligent being capable of learning from my mistakes. You know, people keep saying, what shaped you? There's a lot of things that shaped me. I mean, I'll tell 2 quick. My father, when I was in high school, I got in a vicious fight with 3 guys because they insulted my sister. And I was taken down to the principal's office, and the principal implied that maybe they had a right to insult my sister. So I went across the desk and almost hit him. I had to be constrained. He called my father and said, "Your son's here for fighting and for assaulting the principal." My dad said, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "Because your son was fighting." And he said, "But why are you calling me?" He said, "I don't understand you." He said, "What are the rules? If my son gets in a fight, what are the rules?" Suspension. "Why are you calling me?" And that principal hung up. He said, "You're suspended." And I went home. My dad's like, I was so mad because I thought I did the right thing. He said, "First of all, I want to tell you, I am so proud of you that you stood up for your sister. And if you hadn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You did the right thing. And I am so very proud of you. But there are consequences for your actions. And when you take an action and you believe that you won't suffer the consequences, then there's no righteousness to the action you took. You took an action, there's a consequence, you now need to pay the consequence. So that's that. In the Marine Corps, too, the Marine Corps taught me, I will tell you, I was a hard charging lieutenant. I made a mistake a minute. I mean, I came into my battalion thinking I could change the world, and I had a battalion commander that was going to let me change the world, and I fumbled every chance you could get. I mean, I fell, I did this. I had a 4-star general trying to arrest me once for an initiative that I did. My commander, to save me from being arrested, sent me to flight school, and said, "Well, he's in flight school, we can't pull him out." That's how I got to fly, not because I was some genius aviator, but because I was avoiding arrest. But the point is, what I learned in the Marine Corps is that when you make a mistake, you don't get fired, you don't hide in shame. You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you say, "I learned something," and then you go forward and don't make the same mistake again until you fall and make another mistake. And the Marine Corps grew great leaders because they said, "We understand making mistakes is part of the learning process." I make a mistake a day. I'm glad my daughter calls me out on it. I'm glad Chairman Omali calls me out on it. I'm glad Wilmer, you call me out on it. I'm glad everybody calls me out on it. Not because I'm not flawless, but what makes me, I think, good is that I learn from my mistakes. And at 63 years old, I still make mistakes, but I still learn from them. I pick myself up, I dust myself off, and I say, "Okay, how did that happen? Let's not let that happen again. Let's move forward." That's called being a good citizen. That's called being a good person. I'm not flawless. I'm fundamentally flawed, but I learn from my mistakes.
Scott, you and I, our fathers seem to be of similar mind on that point, because I was about 14, and I won't get into the details, but the response from my dad was, "Son, take that action if you want to, but just remember, grown man moves result in grown man consequences."
Yeah.
So, Chairman, you mentioned, I think you said it was the book of Mark, and the word was God. In the Holy Quran, the first hadith is the prophet, may peace be upon him, is in a cave meditating, and the angel Gabriel appears to him and says, "Read."
Mm.
And the angel Gabriel says, "Read." And they go through this 7 times. So just to show a similarity there.
Yeah.
And I want to end on this note, and I think it's very, very important, because a lot of people in the texting or in streaming have been talking about Scott as a white person and all of this kinds of. What really, people, you need to understand, it's not about white people. It's about whiteness. It's about the mindset, not the phenotype. It's not the phenotype. Look, Linda Thomas Greenfield, U.S. Secretary to the United Nations, backing the play to invade Haiti. That's whiteness. Kamala Harris's stance on Israel has the right to defend itself. That violates international law. The people that are subjected to American imperialism are Black people. That's not a white person. That's whiteness. So again, we have to move beyond the individualism of all of this, and we have to move beyond the personalization of all of this, and we have to understand the ideologies, and we have to understand the mindsets, because Black people can be victimized by whiteness the same way white people are as well. So with that, and also this was incredibly impromptu. We called Scott at the last minute. My brother, thank you so much. Chairman Omali Yeshitela, I will be in Tampa on the 16th. You will see my face in the place.
All right.
Thank you both so much for joining.
Thank you.
Scott, thank you all for the endorsement of this program.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. And again, we're going to work with y'all. Hopefully, for those watching, you'll see both of these or hear both of these gentlemen on my Sirius XM show on Saturday from 11 to 12 p.m. Eastern. Thank you both for joining me today. Scott Ritter, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Love y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Folks, thank you so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned for new episodes every day. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. Those super stickers are wonderful. Thank you for the thumbs up. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. You can find all the links, all the social media links below in the show description. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a great one. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.